Hey, what's up everybody? Skylar Marsh here, and today we're going to take a look at cutting a concave layer. But really what I wanted to highlight in this video was the process of determining my length, determining where the layer is going to sit, how I'm connecting that layer length to my perimeter, and then how I chose the section that was going to be the most efficient for connecting those two lengths of hair. Because when we go through a haircut, we have a lot of choices. Those first decisions that are the most valuable and most crucial. And what I want to highlight with this is I want to empower people to think about haircutting rather than copy and paste and rinse and repeat. Concave layer is just simply a layer that's shorter on the internal side here and longer on the external. What a concave layer does best is it protects length. The guest sits down in your chair. Sometimes they're frustrated because they want to get a haircut, they want more layering, but their number one goal is they don't want to lose any length, and they don't think that there's anything they can do because they associate layering with losing length. That doesn't always have to be the case. Our goal is to protect the length all the way through. So I have a lot of ways that I can approach this. So I just want to kind of go through those ways and talk about how I ended up on the decision that I made. What sections do, they allow you to look at or control a specific aspect of the haircut. This is why we really need to think about why I choose a section. So if I just took a section, I'm going to call this horizontal, that went from the front hairline all the way into the low crown. Taking this section, I can take it, I can cut my length, and then I can move my length up here to the top, right? And I have an idea of how short that length is going to be across here, which is great. So when I turn my guest to the side, I can then see what that length is going to be in the haircut from the front all the way into the back. But what this section doesn't do is it doesn't show me or allow me to see what the length of the perimeter is going to be. So if I cut my first section going across here, every other section I'm gonna have to guess of how high up my elevation has to come in order to work my way all the way down to the bottom to protect all of that length. So my guest sits in the chair and they're talking about they want to protect as much length as possible. I need to choose a section or approach that allows me to look at the length at the top and the length at the bottom at the same time, because that'll allow me to then look at the perimeter and then to create my connection. So because I want to cut a layer that's shorter on the internal side, but I don't want to lose any length, my sectioning choice needs to allow me to look at the top and the bottom of the haircut at the same time. So I have several options for this. I can choose a vertical section, or I can choose a diagonal section. Now, my vertical section could be components of more vertical, less diagonal. And my diagonal section can be, more diagonal than it is vertical. What a vertical section does is it allows you to look at the length at the top here and the length at the perimeter here. Give you the option of how you want to connect those. When I bring this section up, I can comb all of that hair from the perimeter to the top, and I can see how long that perimeter length is. And now I get to decide on how short my length wants to be and how I'm going to connect it into the perimeter. Or the guest can now decide, like, okay, I'm okay losing a little bit of the perimeter into the front as long as I keep my longest length into the back. So you're not guessing at how short your length can be to protect your perimeter. You're connecting your internal length to your perimeter right in section number one. Horizontal only allows you to look at the length of the front and the back and connect it. A vertical allows you to look at the length of the top and the bottom and connect. A diagonal section allows you to look at the length of the top, the length at the bottom, the length at the back, and the length at the front. So all those components are taken care of within a diagonal section. So if I grab this here, brought it all the way up, and including this little bottom part of the hairline, it might not reach, but in this one section now when I bring it up, I can see how far this length traveled from here to here. Now if I spin it around to the front, I bring this through, I can see how long it's going to be from here to here, how long it's going to be from here to here, how long it's going to be from the top to the bottom. So choose your section appropriately for the control that you're looking for. What's most important to me is the connection of length from the top to the bottom. I'm okay losing a little bit of my front length in here today, but I want to maintain most of the length into the back. Perimeter shape, I want it to be more short in the front to long in the back. And I want my layer shape across the top to be a little bit flatter from the inside to the outside. What that's going to do is going to allow that hair across the top where it's the shortest to stand up and create the most volume, and it's going to protect the most length. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of a panel line here, indication of where my section is going to change. Paneling should be done when sections change, elevation changes, or upper direction changes. a vertical section, has a slight little diagonal back to it. So that's what my sectioning looks like. Now, here's the variables if I want to overdirect it more. So there's a little bit of overdirection that already happens in my section just because of the angle that it's happening, meaning that this hair is going to be brought a little bit farther forward in order to reach my cutting line, while this hair is being brought straight up. So this is already being overdirected a little bit. If you stand in front, bring that section out and just add more over direction to it into here, and this will increase how much length you have across the bottom, right? So that's going to be the case, so my body position is going to be here. I'm going to stand in front of my section here in order to pull that hair forward and then work my way all the way around. If I just want to create something that is more natural and mirrors the shape of the hairline, then I'm just going to bring that section straight up and not have any over direction at all, and cut it, and this is going to fall in the shape of the actual hairline. Now, one thing to be aware of is not everybody's hairline is as full as this is, right? So we might need to make exceptions for who's sitting in our chair based off of what we see in our hands, right? It's not one size fits all. Cleaning up some of it. So I'm going to choose my guide off of where they want this length to sit, and then I'm going to connect that to my perimeter. I'm going to bring that section straight up. Always start a little bit longer, and then work your way shorter. Now, I comb that hair and push it up, so I'm pushing it up from the front hairline instead of combing from the back and pulling it forward, because my goal is not necessarily to have any over direction at all. I chose to cut that as a flat line, but if you were trying to protect length to the outside, you could absolutely cut that as a line that is increased, shorter here, longer to the outside, right? And then I can make that even more increased. The more angle that you create, that more perimeter length you're going to preserve. To limit any over direction, I'm combing section 1 back into 2 because section 1 is a reference of length and not of over direction. Three up, I'm going to make my cut from the inside to the outside of my hand. I'm going to recomb from section 1 up, seeing that shorter here to longer at the bottom. Now my next section is going to mirror the one before. My guide is traveling, meaning that section number 2 is my guide, not number 1. Help me control that. I'm going to isolate number 1, combing it forward, and only keeping number 2 in my hand. I'm going to comb 2 up into 3. There's my guide. Your finger position is a reference to what your cutting line is going to be. So my cutting line is boss, meaning my scissors cutting a flat line across the top is what's making my layer flat, nothing else. My fingers can do whatever I want if my scissors are flat. However, people struggle the most with hair cutting as they're not aware of what this is doing. They might be holding their fingers flat like my comb, but their scissors are working up or they're working down. So your cutting line here is what your scissors are actually creating, and that's what's influencing your length and the way that hair falls top to bottom. So my section now is going to go from the apex all the way down to the bottom of the hairline. The reason why my section is going to pivot, it's going to be the most efficient way to work around through the widest part of the head. Now this is where it got maybe a little bit tricky because I'm trying to comb so much hair. But if I can control the hair on the outside of my section, I can do whatever I want with the inside of my section. So I'm going to comb that hair all the way up from the outside, and that's going to allow me then to put the tension on the outside and hold the hair on the inside. Panels, I must be mindful of my body position as I'm not standing in front of my guest, but rather in front of my section. This will allow me to keep my cutting line consistent from beginning to end. Keeping score at home is I haven't cross-checked yet. And really the reason why is I'm most concerned about that line being straight from the top to the bottom. What I see horizontally in this direction, it's going to have a little peaks and valleys, and that's because of the shape of the actual head. So my last section is again going to go from the apex all the way down to the biggity bottom. So you can see that that hair is traveling all the way from the bottom, all the way to the top, a straight line. My short length, and you can see how that length is going here and then that gets longer and longer and longer all the way down to the bottom. Now what we see in the very bottom of the perimeter, the result of the natural hairline, right? Depending on where it's really skinny, where it's really full, the shape of it, you're gonna see through here across the bottom. So on this side, I'm gonna do the same thing, but I have a couple options. My body position, I can stand from the back and cut from the inside to the outside, or I can stand on the front and cut here to here. I'm gonna choose to stand on the back and cut. That way I'm always cutting from my guide to my length. If I stand on the front, I'm gonna end up cutting from my length to my guide. And if my elevation is not what it was from the other side, my elevation may be more on an angle here, I'm gonna end up removing more perimeter length. Length reference from side one. Make sure I'm bringing it straight up and down. This is where I definitely utilize the mirror. Now that I'm standing behind my section and cutting, my guide is on the other side of the hair that I'm holding. So the length that I'm cutting off is here and my guide's on the other side. When that happens, you might need to work smaller sections just to make sure that you can physically see your guide and you're not guessing where that lives. Once you've connected your section from the inside to the outside, if you want to move to your body position to that front, then it would be an option because you've already established your inside and your outside length. Keeping things consistent on my last few sections on the front and back panels. I'm keeping my body position behind just so I can continue to cut from the inside of my layer length to the outside of my perimeter length, making sure I have that connection across the top. Around through the back panels, just again, keeping my body position mindful of where I want to keep my cutting line at. My cutting line is boss, but my body position makes my cutting line feel more comfortable depending on if I'm standing in front or behind. Now I want to cross check, and what I want to do is cross check across the top of the head here. And what I really want to see is that my length is balanced across the top of the head. Because I maximize my elevation, I have a little bit of the hairline that's not connected to the layer length, and right here I'm just changing my cutting line to increased angle down into the bottom of that perimeter. Some people might take the whole layered approach and slide cut it this way. I generally don't like to do that because I'm guessing at where I need to start my slide cutting and where I need to end it. Here I've already had those established, I'm just making the connection. In refinement, I want to give my layer more movement. So really what I'm looking for is areas of light to dark in my layer. Where the hair is darker, it's going to be more dense and have less movement. So I'm concentrating my point cutting in those areas. I am using a longer length of blade because it allows me to get further into the layer to provide more removal further up the hair shaft. Laying the layer over my fingers, I'm going to come in and point into this. This allows me, again, another perspective to look at the density, pointing into that. If I was to cross check, I still have a nice flat line that I created, but what changed was how much hair comes to the end of that flat line. When I drop this down, you can see it fanning out. Where it doesn't fan out, that's where I need to go through and point into that. Into the back, if you notice, you can see how dense that is in the back here. If you think about the approach, we didn't really layer any of this hair. That hair was elevated up and just matched to our layered length. So not much density or length came off in that area. So you might find yourself having to refine a little bit more into that area. But if you remember at the beginning of the consultation, our goal was to keep the length and the density in the back of the haircut. That's exactly what happened. Cleaning up the perimeter, just freehanding it, eyeballing, just coming off what needs to come off before I go ahead and style it out. So finished style, you can see the volume and the width that was created at the top of the haircut through the shorter lengths and how much perimeter was maintained through maximizing elevation.